Dean of the Faculty of Law, Professor Konstantinos Christodoulou.
Dear Mrs. Vice Rector, Your Excellency, dear Minister of Justice, dear Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Excellencies, Ambassadors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure indeed for me as the Dean of the Law Faculty of the Athens Kαποδistριακού National University to welcome you in this prestigious event. By this opportunity, let me share with you two main emotions: gratitude and pride. Gratitude to you, Your Excellency, for this excellent opportunity you offer to us to be enlightened by you in major issues of international law, as well as having with you an in-depth discussion for those issues. And of course, pride, because of the fact that our faculty is being proved once more to have a pioneer role in bridging theory and practice, this time in international level, as well as participating in major international fora. Now, as of the core of this event, let me underline, first of all, that it has relevance not only for the experts of international law. It has major high interest for humble jurists as myself, as well as for citizens. And it is, of course, well known that the Council of Europe as institution addresses itself to citizens. It's well known that there's no bailiff in international law, so its implementation, it's up, actually, in final analysis, it's up to citizens, the active citizens. Now, diving a little bit further in the core of this event, we might say that there is not only the fundamental rights issue itself that has major interest, that's also the methodological aspect. Indeed, due to your presence, Your Excellency, we have the opportunity of seeing or examining how one like you might face things from above. It's well known that fundamental rights are usually characterized as Abwägungsrechte. We might say balancing rights. And therefrom, from this balancing stems the particularity of the jurisprudence of the court, the European Court for Human Rights. Its dynamic or evolutive dimension. We might call this dimension, in terms of the continental law, as extra legem interpretatio, oder Rechtsfortbildung. And with this respect, we might wonder, as Professor Venizelos, ex-deputy president of the government, has said, do we speak actually here of an expanded version, an expansion of the Convention, European Human Rights Convention? An expanded convention, of course, via the jurisprudence of the court. And furthermore, we all know that the convention itself is not to be considered as cemented. It's a living instrument. is actually the jurisprudence, its expansion, be considered as cemented in order to put it in a more positive way? Is there a jurisprudential or judicial, if you prefer, acquis for human rights? Or this jurisprudence remains as flexible as the convention itself? In order to put it in another way, perhaps more formal, I might wonder whether the jurisprudence is allowed to step forwards or even backwards. If you ask me to define the distinction, the borderline, I find it difficult. I might say perhaps that the distinction has to do with the letter of the law, the letter of the convention. Backwards, closer to the letter of the convention, forwards, a little bit more, in a little bit more distance, bigger distance. Anyway, because of all these thoughts, in view of all these thoughts, permit me once more to thank you, Your Excellency, wholeheartedly for your presence here and to congratulate in advance the organizers of this event, mainly our ex-dean, ex-president of the European Court for Human Rights, Professor Dinos Alexandros Sicilianos, for the success and the bright of this event. Thank you very much for your attention.
Presentation of the work and personality of the keynote speaker by the former President of the European Court of Human Rights and Professor at the Faculty of Law, Dinos Alexandros Sicilianos.
Madam Vice Rector, Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor to welcome today Mr. Alain Berset, Secretary General of the Council of Europe, who assumed office on 18 September 2024 for a 5-year mandate. Before his election, Mr. Berset served for more than a decade as an elected member of the Swiss Federal Council from 2012 to 2023. During this period, he headed the Federal Department of Home Affairs as Swiss Minister of Health, Social Affairs, Culture, Equality, and Anti-Discrimination. As Minister of Public Health, he played a central role throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2018, Mr. Berset became President of the Swiss Confederation, making him the youngest person to hold this office since 1934. He was re-elected president in 2023. During his presidencies, he was deeply engaged in international affairs, representing Switzerland at the highest level, including on the United Nations Security Council. He also signed the Reykjavik Declaration on behalf of Switzerland at the Council of Europe's 4th Summit of Heads of State and Government, where member states reaffirmed their commitment to the European Convention of Human Rights and the European Court of Human Rights as the ultimate guarantors of human rights across the continent. Prior to joining the Federal Council, Mr. Berset was a member of the Council of States, the upper house of the Swiss Parliament. Elected in 2003 as its youngest member, he went on to serve as his president from 2008 to 2009. Today, as Secretary General of the Council of Europe, Mr. Berset occupies a pivotal position within Europe's architecture. As the face of the organization, he embodies its values and its mission. Elected by the Parliamentary Assembly upon the recommendation of the Committee of Ministers, the Secretary General fulfills a wide range of essential functions. He leads the organization, bears overall responsibility for its strategic direction and management, and maintains continuous and constructive dialogue with member states. In doing so, he plays a central role in strengthening the protection of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law across Europe. The Secretary General also supports the work of the European Court of Human Rights, the cornerstone of the European human rights system, and the vital safeguard for millions of individuals. In today's turbulent times, marked by growing challenges to international law and human rights, this role has never been more crucial. Europe is facing multiple and interrelated pressures that threaten the foundations of democratic societies. Freedom of expression is increasingly under strain. Journalists face threats and harassment, while human rights defenders and civil society organizations operate within a shrinking civic space. At the same time, the spread of disinformation and misinformation undermines public trust, distorts democratic debate, and weakens social cohesion. Violence is also on the rise. Nearly 1 in 3 women experiences intimate partner violence, while children may be at risk of abuse in various settings. Rapid advances in artificial intelligence may further exacerbate these challenges, particularly through the production and dissemination of harmful AI-generated contents. In parallel, hateful rhetoric targeting migrants and refugees has intensified, with individuals arriving from outside Europe increasingly portrayed as threats to national security or identity. These narratives risk deepening divisions and eroding the principles of dignity and equality that lie at the heart of human rights. Moreover, the risks to international peace and security posed by ongoing conflicts cannot be ignored. Within Europe, the most striking example remains the war of aggression against Ukraine, now approaching its 4th year. The growing number of interstate cases before the European Court of Human Rights linked to armed conflicts bears witness to the current geopolitical tensions. At the same time, the increasing recourse by states to human rights treaties before the International Court of Justice to pursue accountability for grave violations reflects humanity's enduring demand for justice and peace. Against this backdrop of democratic backsliding and human rights regression, the Secretary General Alain Berset has remained firmly committed to the effective fulfillment of his mandate. In his most recent report towards a new democratic pact for Europe, he offers a comprehensive assessment of the state of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law across the Council of Europe's 46 member states, identifying both alarming trends and emerging challenges. In response, Mr. Berset has called for a new democratic pact for Europe, conceived as a collective, forward-looking initiative to renew democratic commitments and restore citizens' trust in democratic institutions. This pact rests on 3 core objectives. First, achieving a shared commitment to democratic values. Second, conducting a broad consultation on democratic challenges by fostering dialogue and understanding the roots of declining trust. And third, translating the outcomes of these consultations into concrete policies at European, national, regional, and local levels. As Europe enters a crucial phase of this consultation process, the Secretary General, together with the Council of Europe, has launched a series of initiatives aimed at revitalizing democracy. Just last week, a high-level international conference in Strasbourg highlighted the essential role of civil society in building more inclusive and resilient democracies. Such initiatives not only give civil society a platform, but also transform dialogue into practical guidance, helping to lay solid foundations for the future of democracy in Europe. It is therefore with great interest and anticipation that we now turn to the keynote address of the Secretary General of the Council of Europe. Thank you very much for your kind attention. I now have the privilege of inviting Mr. Alain Berset to the podium.
Address by the representative of the Prime Minister, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Theoharis.
Your Excellency, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you for this address and reassure you that Deputy Minister Papadopoulou wanted very much to address this distinguished audience, but a sudden illness is not allowing her to be here with us to make this address herself. So I'm delivering this in her stand. Today's world is a very turbulent and difficult world, very different from the world that established human rights a few decades ago, when the UN and its various mechanisms and bodies began to actively promote the need for human rights protection. Yet the challenges we face today are no less significant. Rising authoritarianism, increasing geopolitical tensions, the gradual erosion of human rights protection system, mass migration, climate change, growing inequalities, as well as the opportunities and risks posed by the rapid development of artificial intelligence. These are just some of the challenges facing us. At these critical times, for the state of democracy, the rule of law, and human rights in many parts of the world, strong presence, timely reactions, and rapid responses are very much needed. And this is why, allow me to reiterate, we highly appreciate your unwavering commitment to standing up for these causes. In fact, for standing up for all of us, as individuals and as active citizens. A sound testament to this commitment is your initiative for a new democratic pact, aiming at reinforcing respect for international law and multilateralism, as well as the relevance of these values. Or in your own words, a Europe where citizens feel heard, empowered, and protected. A Europe that proves, through action, that democracy is not only worth believing in, but worth building every day. That said, I deeply believe that there could be no more fitting place for you to address the Council of Europe and contemporary challenges in human rights, rule of law, democracy, this important issue, than here at the University of Law, where the future generation is watching us, and where part of this audience will bear the responsibility of carrying forward the torch of this noble cause, the protection of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. In this context, and in front of young people, I would like to strike a note of optimism and stress that, for Greece, the Council of Europe is not merely another multilateral forum of international cooperation. For Greece, the Council of Europe is a compass. We never forget that the Council of Europe provided valuable support to the Greek people when democracy was abolished from 1967 to 1974. until democratic institutions were re-established and Greece rejoined the Council of Europe family. Now, should we forget that Greece remains a staunch supporter of this organization, of the European Convention on Human Rights and the European Court of Human Rights, and this is not an empty or incantatory statement. Indeed, the European Convention on Human Rights and the European Court of Human Rights represent an incredible achievement. Countries and peoples who fought one another for centuries have come together to protect human dignity and to ensure respect for human rights. Thanks to the Council of Europe, the death penalty has been abolished throughout Europe. Thanks to the Council of Europe, torture has become a horror of the past. Thanks to the Council of Europe, sustained efforts are being made to combat human trafficking and violence against women, and the list goes on and on. Let us cherish these achievements. Let us acknowledge the strength of the foundations we have built together within the Council of Europe. At times, it may be tempting to disregard shared standards and to cast doubt on the need to protect them and to protect human rights and uphold the rule of law. In such cases, we should exercise great caution and bear in mind the broader importance of stability and trust within Europe, particularly in today's turbulent times. It is important to remain critical of one another, but perhaps most of all, we must have the courage to be critical of ourselves. Distinguished guests, Your Excellency, I am proud to say when it comes to defending democracy, the rule of law and human rights, one of the most prominent aspects of our commitment to multilateralism and to the Council of Europe lies in safeguarding the foundations of international law, a notion with which our audience today is particularly familiar. This is especially relevant in light of current crises around the world and in our immediate neighborhood, most notably the ongoing war in Ukraine, where the Council of Europe has been exceptionally active through initiatives that Greece has supported from the outset, namely the Register of Damage, the International Claims Commission, the prospect of a compensation mechanism, and the Special Tribunal for the crime of aggression against Ukraine. As the war in Ukraine inevitably serves as a litmus test of our credibility with regard to international law, we must also act prudently and pragmatically. We must actively seek to foster synergies at the international level to respond effectively to today's global challenges. In the same vein, we must ensure the long-term effectiveness of the control system of the European Convention of Human Rights, while coping with the Court's caseload and ensuring effective implementation of the Convention at a national level. In this context, Greece strives vigorously and diligently through legislative and awareness-raising measures to combat racism, xenophobia, and hate speech, and to promote intercultural dialogue with the aim of solidifying pluralistic, non-discriminatory, and democratic societies. In parallel, thanks to the Council of Europe, we pursue a civilian and holistic approach to addressing extremism and terrorism grounded in criminal justice and the rule of law, while fully protecting human rights. In addition, particular importance must be accorded to the social fabric of our society. To diminish the risk of social exclusion, it is more necessary than ever to protect the human and social rights of the most vulnerable individuals and groups, an area in which the Council of Europe already provides significant expertise. Speaking of democratic societies, migration and the economic and social consequences deriving therefrom are coming unavoidably to the fore. The recent tragic incident of the coast of Chios, resulting in the loss of 15 lives, and the scenes of profound sorrow at the island's hospital deeply moved us all. This is a challenge we must confront collectively in a spirit of cooperation, taking into account both its serious humanitarian aspect and our responsibility to safeguard the well-being of our societies. Greece has long faced immense migration pressure, while serving as a transit country for increased migrant and refugee flows. At the same time, our profound attachment to independence, integrity, and impartiality of the European Court on Human Rights, as well as its caseload, shapes our approach in this area. Compliance with the Court's final judgments is the basis of our collective efforts as well as a core obligation of all states parties to the Convention. Distinguished guests, Your Excellency, as an epilogue, and in light of your Lord Byron Award ceremony, as well as the fact that today, on 9th of February, we celebrate the World Greek Language Day, allow me to conclude with a few Greek words in English. The Council of Europe and Greece are synchronized through a polymorph and harmonious dialogue, through pragmatism and non-dogmatism. We can synthesize the plethora of ideas and methods which shall base the quintessence of our synergies. That exercise is not Herculean, but with a pinch of Periclean wisdom, it can become the axis of euphoria for our shared history. This is exactly what he meant, what Lord Byron meant, when he said in one of his verses, "Adversity is the first path to truth." And if our times seem to be adverse, let the Council of Europe be this path. Thank you very much.
Keynote speech by the Secretary General of the Council of Europe, Mr. Alain Berset.
Minister Floridis, Deputy Minister Theokaris, Secretary General of the Presidency Ambassador Hadzi, Vice Rector Papaioannou, Dean Christodoulou, President of the Academy of Athens, Diamandouros, President of the Society for Hellenism and Phil-Hellenism, Verentas, Professor Sigirianos, Ambassador to the Council of Europe, Sigalas, civil and religious authorities, excellencies, faculty, and students, ladies and gentlemen. Αποτελεί μεγάλη τιμή και συγκίνηση να μιλώ για τη δημοκρατία εδώ στην Αθήνα, λίγα μόλις λεπτά μετά πόδια από την αρχαία αγορά. Και να στοραζόμαστε το μέλλον της δημοκρατίας σε μια εποχή μεγάλων προκλήσεων τόσο εκ των έσω όσο και πέραν της υπήρου μας. And I take this opportunity to congratulate Greece for this International Day for the Greek language, never forgetting that Greek language is also strongly linked with culture. Ladies and gentlemen, Greece gave us democracy 2,500 years ago. But Greece also gave us tragedy. Tragedy is when everyone sees what is coming and nothing can stop it. In Ukraine, Russia insists on acquiring land by force, land it has not conquered. After 4 years of a brutal, illegal war of aggression, peace is still elusive. In Greenland, President Trump said he would make this semi-autonomous territory of Denmark part of the United States, and I quote, "the easy way or the hard way," end of quote. This was once unthinkable. The headlines moved on, but the threat has not. Gaza, Venezuela, now Iran, reflect wider disregard for international law. That is why I have said that international law is either universal or meaningless. That is the rupture in the world order. But ladies and gentlemen, none of this happened overnight. We told ourselves that the financial crisis, that the pandemic, the climate crisis, and the return of populism were setbacks. In fact, they were deep cracks in the architecture that we know. And you remember, like me, we all thought probably that democracy would simply expand, generation after generation, that peace in Europe would simply endure. But the more aggressive Russia and a less engaged America leave us no choice. Because a continent that abandons legal consistency in exchange for short-term protection does not become more autonomous. No, it becomes more dependent. Dependent on security guarantees it does not control, and dependent on decisions taken elsewhere. We were not prepared for disinformation to reshape democratic debates. We were not prepared for governments to challenge the authority of the European Court of Human Rights. But now that this is happening, now our responsibility is to decide how to act. Because we know there is no way back to the old world. There is only one way forward. And we can decide how the future will look like. In Greek tragedy, audiences often know how the story ends. Limits are crossed, warnings are ignored, and the fall begins to look inevitable. And as you know, Europe is being told a similar story today. That power will decide, that rules will fade, that middle powers and smaller states must adjust. It is a world where big powers divide the map into so-called spheres of influence. It is a world where institutions stall while coalitions replace common rules. It is a world where security shifts from law to leverage. It is a world where trade, migration, and defense become transactional bargains. And to be honest, I think we do not accept that ending. This cannot be the tragedy. And yes, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, there is another way. We, at the Council of Europe, we call this another way democratic security. Democratic security. What Europe needs now is a security architecture that protects institutions, that protects rights, that protects freedoms. One that moves beyond the divide between so-called hard and soft security. To be honest, this divide is totally outdated. Borders, energy, cyber, we can speak about defense, even elections. Today, everything is spoken in the language of security. And the danger is that security becomes the excuse to set law aside. But law remains the last common language capable of restraining power in a fragmenting world. What does it mean exactly? It means nothing else that democracy, human rights, and the rule of law are no longer peripheral to security. They are its center of gravity. Yes, law is Europe's form of power. In Greek mythology, Penelope wove by day what was undone by night. And defending international law can feel a bit the same. What can take decades to build can be undone in moments. Democratic security does not replace other forms of security, including military security. Democratic security is what makes all forms of security legitimate, sustainable, and accountable. As Europe is rearming, we all witness this. As Europe is rearming on a scale not seen since the Cold War, military power only protects a democracy if democracy remains strong enough to control it. Otherwise, the risk is that extremist parties could gain control of strong armies with no one to stop them. And I think for a lot of countries, but also for Greece, at the crossroads of Europe, Asia, and Africa, this is not theoretical. It is felt in war to the east, migration pressures to the south, and responsibilities within NATO. Speaking about war, I think of Ukraine, obviously. Ukraine is the front line of democratic security, and Greece has demonstrated that commitment, supporting Ukraine's armed forces and securing winter gas supplies. I think we cannot allow Ukraine to be pushed into the background as crises compete for attention. That would be a serious mistake. And this is exactly where the work of the Council of Europe on accountability comes into play. You've heard about the register of damage for Ukraine. This register is now fully operational since, soon 2 years. Already more than 100,000 claims have been lodged, and it will raise really quickly now because the register is opening new categories regularly. And in December, last December, 2 months ago, states, more than 35 states, and Greece is also part of the agreement, states signed the convention establishing the next step. And this next step is the International Claims Commission. We also have launched an advanced team for a special tribunal for the crime of aggression. This is a new legal infrastructure built in the middle of war. And this is exactly the very core center of what we are doing for accountability, based on these three pillars. I mentioned the tribunal, I can mention the Claims Commission, the register, never forgetting the European Court on Human Rights. Addressing daily cases of violations of human rights in the context of the war in Ukraine. And when the fighting stops, we hope in good conditions as soon as possible for Ukraine, for Ukrainian people. When the fighting stops, the Council of Europe will still be there with the action plan that we are implementing in Ukraine and with a very important office in Kiev. I'm regularly in contact with our agents working for the Council of Europe in Ukraine in war conditions right now, without heating, bombed every night. More than 100 people working outside of the Ukrainian population to make accountability happen. And why are we doing this? It is for democratic reconstruction, it is for justice. Because without accountability, there can be no just and lasting peace. And it is impossible to have a democracy without accountability. Accountability is fully part of democracy. We call these elections. We can call this differently, but it is fully part of accountability. I also mentioned before migration, and it was also present in different interventions. Migration is shaping Europe's politics once again. Across our continent, hostility toward migrants and minorities is growing. We are told there are only two options: to set international law aside in the name of control, or to defend principles while ignoring legitimate pressures. I think this is a false choice. The danger is creating a climate where law becomes contingent, standards negotiable, and exceptions multiply. This is exactly how double standards take hold. Security and rights are not opposites. And that is why democratic security means holding both. And that is why ministers are working within the European Convention on Human Rights to ensure that security and rights move together. In that sense, a political declaration is being prepared for adoption in Chisinau, Ministerial Conference of the Council of Europe next May. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, trust, too, has become a security issue. Foreign interference and AI-driven manipulation now shape political debate long before people vote. Elections are becoming easier to influence and harder to trust. Journalists face threats. Civic space is narrowed by new foreign influence laws. Courts are placed under political pressure, including the European Court of Human Rights. And that is why the Council of Europe is working now on a new convention on disinformation and foreign interference. Not to police speech, but to protect democratic agency. Because today the challenge is not getting information. Absolutely not. The challenge today is knowing what to trust. The rupture we are living through is not only geopolitical, it is democratic. And to understand its scale, imagine just the history of human government compressed into a single day, 24 hours. Only late in the evening, very late in the evening, did people begin to claim power for themselves. For most of the day, power belonged to pharaohs and empires, to kings and dynasties, to tyrants and dictators. But about democracy, it all began here in Greece. In Athens, citizens gathered to deliberate, to vote, and hold leaders accountable. This was radically new. Each rupture carried danger, but also the possibility of beginning again. That is exactly, I think, the moment Europe faces now. And democratic security is our continent's answer. A way of binding power to law, a way of making rights the foundation of security, not its casualty. I think this is now Europe's work, and I think also it is now. I thank you for your attention.
A discussion will follow that will be coordinated by a professor at the Faculty of Law, Linos Alexandros Sicilianos.
Excellency, thank you so much for your speech. The floor is open to everyone. The Secretary General would be keen to reply to your questions. So it's now the moment to raise them with him. I know that the first question is always the most difficult. Yes, Professor Gavunelli.
Thank you so much for your speech. I'm always suggesting that perhaps when we're talking about democratic security, we're talking in essence about human security. And I'm going to refer to the fact that when we're talking about human security, we're talking in essence about the citizens of Europe, the citizens of the world. I'm here with two hats. First, as a professor of international law at the University of Athens, but also as the president of the Greek National Commission for Human Rights. And in that capacity, I would like to invite you to perhaps expand a little bit more on security, democratic security, and human security, taking into account the fact that national human rights institutions are in fact the bridge makers between civil society and the state. And the fact that we seem to expand, to go beyond that dichotomy between the state and nothing else. We have been very active in the context of the Council of Europe in many, many things, including in assisting the European Court of Human Rights. The Greek National Commission has actually received an invitation by the court, a very rare invitation by the court to contribute in some of their cases. So I would like to hear a bit more about your thoughts on the possibilities of further engagement with the Council of Europe. Thank you so very much.
So thank you very much for the question. It's always really difficult for me, to also very dangerous to try to answer questions from professors and specialists. I will try to do my best, and I welcome Theodoros with us. No, I think it would be really wrong to oppose human security and democratic security. How we see democratic security, we see democratic security as a whole context, and is also to, I would say, go a step further beyond this divide that we had in the last decades, making the opposition between what I would call, hard security and soft security. That's wrong. Because in this kind of, reflections, we would probably put institutions, rights, human security, and those elements under more the soft elements. Giving the impression, okay, let's us make sure that the hard elements are really secured, and we will see for the soft elements later. That's wrong. We need to do this and to take this together. It's exactly the way we've chosen taking this concept of democratic security. It's not new. I am really lucky, to have this privilege to lead the Secretariat of the Council of Europe, because a lot of excellent job has been done for a long time. And this concept of democratic security comes from the 90s. It was well developed and used, but I think now we need to make it stronger and to reaffirm that it will never bring us stability and security if we only forget to have strong institutions, trustable institutions, and stable institutions. And doing this, I think, without being a specialist, I think that all the elements concerning human security will be also an important part of this whole discussion. It is an open discussion, it is a work in progress, but if we can make real that we will develop at the same time, with the same energy, the hard security, and it is necessary today, no discussion, and at the same time, with the same engagement, the democratic security and the strong institutions, we will make sure that we can have stability and security for the long time.
Thank you very much. Any other question? Yes, please, the Vice President of the Hellenic Society of International Law and International Relations, Professor Marouda.
Thank you very much. I have one question on what we call more and more as disputed territories or gray zones in the Council of Europe area. When monitoring bodies cannot have access to those gray zones or disputed territories, is there something that can be done?
Thank you for the question. I mean, we are just between us here, small. I mean, I can really speak openly, I'm sure. It remains between us. No, I mean, I think we are very good, and we have been very good during decades, accompanying countries, societies, authorities, just willing to make progress, to have more convergence, to have more democracy, a stronger rule of law, and stronger support for human rights. I mean, it's more or less the whole history on our continent after the Second World War. In general, I know that we have setbacks and even wars in different countries and regions. Just think about the Balkan, Western Balkan in the 90s. I know also the situation that was mentioned before in Greece during these years where there was no democracy. I mean, we have this, but in general, it was going in a strong direction for more. And then we had even this maybe naive approach, and I was the first with this, thinking in the 90s, 2000, now it will be bright. And we are just noting now that it's not the case. It is going in another direction. We are more and more diverging, returning to, the state level, État-nation, and we are not that good at maximizing the impact that we want to have for strong democracy, rule of law, and human rights in a context where we are not more called to help, to be at the side, but who are more seen as maybe, engaging in another direction. We need to think this really deeply. We need to think about this and to maybe change also some methods to make sure that we can have the strongest possible impact. That's the first element. Second element, how to do this? Engaging clearly and strongly with states, we do this. Never forgetting the context. Because maybe the risk was in the past to have too strong silos. We have specialists from different fields just thinking about their, topics. And what I try to do at the Council of Europe is always to recall the fact that it is impossible to maximize our impact for democracy, rule of law, and human rights, ignoring the context, ignoring the economical context, ignoring the geopolitical context. And I try to push this a bit more than it was the case maybe before for good reasons, but now the world changed and we need also to adapt in this direction. And it is helping, because then when we are engaging with countries, understanding the context in there they are just working, it helps to find common ways to make some progress. And I'm sure that it can also help to have, a better access also for monitorings. And the last point, it is a fantastic idea, the Council of Europe. 46 countries, member states, committed at a very high level, for the European Convention on Human Rights. It doesn't exist on other continents. No police, no constraint, to implement what we want, but this, I would say, friendly accompaniment by all the states, like for the execution of the judgment of the court, by the way. It's not always easy. It remains difficult, particularly now. But to have this, friendly pressure from all the states, being a member of the family is one of the best ways to make some progress in these moments where it is more and more diverging. These 2 points, not the end of the history, but maybe a start how to think and what we can do to make progress in this particular moment.
Thank you very much. Any other question? Yes, please.
Sehr geehrter Herr Bundesrat, I have been impressed, like probably everybody else in this room, by your command of the Greek language. And I was very happy to hear you mention so often the word democracy, which, as you rightly said, was born here. You are too prudent to mention that in Switzerland, I am a Greek-Swiss citizen, it's actually the country where we live the direct democracy. And while you have been speaking, I have been looking at Lord Byron, who is just behind you. And I want to ask you, as a bridge to the next step of this nice ceremony, how do you judge 200 years after Lord Byron's death, the impact of the Greek Revolution and the impact of Lord Byron, and by the way, a Swiss countryman who died 200 years back during the exodus of Mesologi, Hans Jakob Mayer from Switzerland. How is the bridge to what you are doing now to the Greek Revolution?
Well, it's a quite complicated question. You know, I must try to, you know, what can I say here? I mean, the link, I don't want to engage too much, you know, in links about, well, important people and important moments. Just maybe one thing. And I will make the link with the history that started here in Greece, as I mentioned before. It was not, you know, forever. Huh? Then we had different, well, bumpy situations. It was not that long, if we just have a look in this history 2,500 years ago. But it started. And it was documented to have this and all the informations today. That's what, by the way, is remarkable in Greece. I was this morning in Delphi. It's really impressive to how this whole history is so close to us. We feel this, you know, this link very, very strongly, and probably much stronger here in Greece than in other parts of Europe. I think the link is that we had at a certain moment, and that will be the link between Lord Byron, between also Swiss citizens, and also maybe the start of democracy in Switzerland, how it is known now, and how it was also here. I think in all those situations, you need to have one person or a small group of people deciding that there is the moment to change something. What does it mean? Just having the courage to go with optimism and a lot of energy in the future, and not just to look back. I mean, it is the link between all those situations. And, well, speaking about Switzerland, it was exactly the same situation at different stages of the history. And one of these stages was after the Civil War. I mean, nobody knows this, but we had a civil war in Switzerland, 1847. It was very Swiss. Not that much people died, you know, it was really moderate, but it was a civil war. And in this civil war, the strength of the winners was just after winning the war, the first step was to integrate as much as possible those lost the war. And I can tell you this because I come from a canton that loses the war. I am a Catholic, it was also linked to religion, and my canton lost the war. And I know that this strength, this courage to look into the future and to integrate those people was decisive at this moment. But it was a decision for very few people. Having this intelligence, this, how to say this, being clever enough to see this as the only, not only the responsibility, but also the only way to have stability and progress all together in the future. And I think that's the link, probably. But as we know, history is not linear. It can be also, well, going in the wrong direction, I would say. We are speaking today on backsliding democracy, and it's a reality for different reasons. And it's exactly the reason why we need to have the same courage at the same moment to make steps forward and to create the future in which we want to live in.
Well, the links between Switzerland and Greece are well known. Perhaps one last question then. Yes, please.
Your Excellency, thank you very much for being here with us today. It's a great honor. You said there are 46 member states in the Council of Europe. 46 member states committed at the highest level, but nevertheless, nowadays, we are seeing that many of those, they're sort of revising their commitment. Everybody is talking about safety, security, and much less about what the essence of protecting the human rights, the basic human rights is. Obviously, we all need to revise the sense of human rights in comparison to the concept of these 46 member states of security. Security is the key word, but revisiting the human rights within the frame, perhaps, of security, I don't know. How would you see this happening within the Council of Europe, which is an entity that carries several ideas, several concepts of this great ideal, which is the human right? Merci beaucoup.
If I understood well the question, it is about this commitment, but also divergences, growing divergences between states, and we have a lot of examples, I must tell you. I see this. It could be on security, even on security. I mean, my impression is that everybody is just looking now for the best way to have stable and long-standing security. And I think it includes, really, it must include institutions, democratic processes, and it must include populations. It is our way of, well, solving problems. About those divergences, we had some examples. And, you know, it is, yes, an ideal, the commitments to the European Convention on Human Rights. And it is clear that all countries, I see this transparently, are not at the same level. Starting from different situations with different contexts. And for me, the most important thing is not at which level you start. It is how the dynamic looks like. Do we have a positive dynamic, or is this a negative dynamic? That means for less rights, more authoritarian, behaviors, more use, illegal use of force, different things in that direction, or are the countries trying to have a path in another direction? And it's exactly what I told before. I think until, I would say, more or less 2008, we had an impression that it is going in the right direction. And then probably it's changed. Why? We are witnessing and living right now since 17 years. Maybe the first really strong element was the financial crisis, 2008. And then the consequences, financial crisis, debt crisis, explosion of inequalities, strong, shocks for states. Then we had the first stage, I would say, of the war in Ukraine, Crimea by Russia. Then we had, the rise of, sorts of populism that we are thinking they disappeared for always. They are back. Then we had the crisis of multilateralism against UN and other organizations. We had the election of Trump, Bolsonaro, and others. We had the pandemics then, just what the pandemics to this. And then the full-scale invasion of Russia and Ukraine, and during the whole time, the climate crisis. What does it mean? All those crises, it is just destroying all perspective about the future. It is impossible to have a strong projection in the future in the middle of crisis and this huge sequence of crises. And it makes a huge difference between the 90s and today. I was 20 years old in 1992. I can tell you, for me, we have seen what's happening in the Balkans, the war and all the things. But in general, the mood was, it will be better, we will solve this, and we will have a bright future. And I was able to make some projections and plans for myself, for my families, for my friends, for 20 years. What is the reality now for 20 years old young people? I have 3 children, 18, 20, 22. They don't know what will happen in 2 years. Just think about what it means at the personal level. The same for states. It's much more difficult right now with this also, distance with democracy that young people are also taking to create a future where it is converging and we can avoid what you described as divergence also on security issues and other issues in our countries. I think if we are able to have stability, to fight against instability, to have the possibility to have perspectives for states, for member states, for families, for faculties, for our friends, for yourself, for myself, it will be much easier to define together what we want to have a future, to define the goal, and then to make the convergence in this direction. This is exactly what is at stake today, to have security, to have stability back, strong institutions, and then we will have security as well.
Thank you very much. Without wanting to abuse my position, perhaps one more question. Yeah, Dr. Kostopoulou from the Grevio, the president of Grevio.
Thank you. Thank you for your brilliant speech as well. I have a more general question. The current international landscape is marked by emerging challenges. We observe the emergence of the creation of new international institutions, international organizations, while at the same time we observe that the longest standing organizations, such as the United Nations, operate under extreme pressure and difficulties. How would you see the role of the Council of Europe in the next few years in this very challenging international context?
Well, thank you for this question. Recent history, I mean the last century, shows us that in crisis, international multilateral organization expand, adapt, or disappear. That's the first element. I mean, there is a change also for international organization. That's the first point. The second point, the Société des Nations, how is the name in English? You know, before the UN, didn't disappear because the principles and the values have been not good. It disappeared because the strongest members and people committed to this just forget to be strong for the values and the principles. That means we need at the same time be very clear on the principles we want to follow, on the values, but also open to see what's happening in the context and able to make some changes to be as strong as possible in new context. It is clear when everything is changing around us, we need to see what is changing and to adapt the position to be as strong as possible. What does it mean now for the Council of Europe and for other multilateral organizations? You know, we are between us, as I was telling before. I will be really open with you what I think. We are seeing that we have different kind of multilateral organizations. We have the most important, the UN, a major achievement after the Second World War. And the UN is indispensable, it is clear. At the same time, it is, because of the architecture of the all bodies, quite ineffective in some of the most important issues that we have now. It's really difficult in Ukraine because of veto. It's very difficult in Gaza because of veto and other situations. But we need to support also the reform and all evolution of the UN. I'm strongly convinced that for the Council of Europe, we have an additional role to play. And I was in contact recently with other regional multilateral organizations. We can deliver at the regional level for all the world. Just take the example of Ukraine. The Register of Damage and now the Claims Commission, it is a creation of the Council of Europe. But it is open to all the states of the world. It is possible for everybody to join. I mean, we are able to prepare something. We are not blocked. I mean, the organization took the decision in 22 to expel Russia. Well, I mean, for well-known reasons. I mean, it's not possible to have a member aggressing another member and destroying democracy, rule of law, and human rights without respect for the commitment to the European Convention on Human Rights. That was clear. But it allowed the organization to be really effective, to deliver really quickly, and then to bring the product, if I can tell it so. In this case, it is the Register of Damage and now the Claims Commission, and then to invite all the countries around the globe, around the world, to join. And I'm strongly convinced that this kind of regionalization of solutions and then open to the whole world could be one of additional elements responding quite directly to the new situation that we are facing right now. That's for me a really important element. In other words, being agile, able to react, to see what's happening, to change where it is necessary to change, but always to be stronger, not to be weaker. Always to make sure that what we have as a commitment after the Second World War remains strong. Democracy, rule of law, and human rights. And I will just end on this point now. The Council of Europe was not created for good weather conditions. It was exactly created just after the Second World War, and it is an achievement. 4 years after the end of the war, 10 countries create the Council of Europe. Among them, the enemies on the field 4 years before. It's impressive. It was really, okay, it's not possible to witness this. We need really to do better. Never again means we need to engage and to work. It was created in tough conditions. And then it was really effective and really extremely important in tough moments. And maybe we are witnessing such a moment right now, where the role of the Council of Europe must be really to be present, agile, to be effective, to be efficient, to be able to act, and to deliver. And we are exactly trying to do our best in this direction.
Awarding ceremony of the Lord Byron Prize, address by the President of the Academy of Athens, Nikiforos Diamantouros, Professor Emeritus of the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to be able to address you on this occasion. My role is minimal, primarily because Professor Sicilianos has gone into great length in extolling and detailing all the achievements of our guest. Therefore, it is not for me to be able to repeat that and essentially bore you. But I do want to say that meeting the Secretary General of the Council of Europe brings back my memories from being for 10 years in Strasbourg as the Ombudsman of the European Union and of having sustained contact with the Council of Europe, which in the jurisprudence, if we can use the term, of the Ombudsman, the Council figures very, very strongly and centrally. We derived inspiration from the decisions of the Court of Justice, the European Court of Human Rights, but also from the general position of the Venice Commission and its support for democracy. So it is for this reason that I am particularly pleased to introduce the chapter of this evening that has to do with the Byron Prize and welcome you on this particular occasion. Thank you very much.
Presentation of the award recipient and honorary reference to the Swiss Philhellenism by the President of the Society of Hellenism and Philhellenism, Mr. Konstantinos Velentsas.
Your Excellency, Your Excellencies, dear President of the Academy of Athens, dear Rector of the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great honor that I present today, on behalf of the Society for Hellenism and Philhellenism, the Lord Byron Award for 2025. Lord Byron received at the beginning of the 19th century an education based on classics, inspired by Greek history, which influenced his remarkable literary and intellectual work. This distinguished romantic poet, with great ethos, led with his work the foundations for the perpetuation of Hellenism as a noble virtue, as a set of values that allows every civilized person to develop in a way that is beneficial and creative for them and for their society. These are the everlasting values of the freedom, democracy, justice, and human rights. All these values promote progress, innovation, and social responsibility. It is along these lines that Lord Byron and Philhellenism inspired thousands of young men and women from all parts of Europe and the United States of America to work and even fight as volunteers for the liberation of Greece. Switzerland was one of the key centers on Philhellenism during the Greek War of Independence, and most importantly, Geneva itself. We pay tribute here today to all of them, and first of all to Jean-Gabriel Einard, a close friend of Ioannis Kapodistrias, who was the heart, the brain, and the soul of the Philhellenic movement in Switzerland and even in Europe. He is considered a national benefactor of Greece, and his legacy persists. We also remember the editor of the first newspaper in Greece, Hellenic Chronicles, Ελληνικά Χρονικά, Johann Jakob Meyer, who was killed with his family during the exodus in Messaloniki 200 years ago. And of course, Dr. Louis-André Gauss, also from Geneva, who saved thousands of Greeks during a serious pandemic of plague that took place in 1828. Of course, we also honor all the 50 Swiss volunteers that we identified through our work so far, who organized and staffed the first regular army of Greece and fought many battles, like General Karl Wilhelm von Heydrich, General Ameneus Emmanuel Hahn, Colonel Louis Chevalier, and so many others. 11 of them offered their lives for the liberation of Greece. In recognition for their deeds and sacrifices, the names of all Swiss Philhellenes are engraved on the Philhellenes monument in the center of Athens, just in front of the War Museum, and have found there a permanent place in the pantheon of Greek heroes. The Lord Byron Award is presented today with honor to His Excellency, Mr. Alain Berset, Secretary General of the Council of Europe and President of the Swiss Confederation in 2018 and in 2023. A distinguished personality, a visionary politician with an exemplary national and international career inspired by the Philhellenic values. Mr. Berset is recognized as a solution-oriented and consensus-building statesman and a key figure in European human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. Through the new Democratic Pact of Europe, he addressed democratic backsliding, disinformation, and the ethical regulation of artificial intelligence, which he also advocated for human rights-based approaches to environmental protection. He's a great supporter of Ukraine's recovery, among others, through the establishment of mechanisms for Russian accountability, and he referred to all this today. We followed Mr. Berset's wish, and we transferred the $10,000 associated with his prize to the Ukrainian Red Cross Society, which received the amount with honor and asked us to convey here today their gratitude and appreciation. Mr. Berset, we have a letter sent. Cher Monsieur Berset, in granting you this award, we honor you as a contemporary Philhellene in the most universal sense of the word, committed in upholding the democratic values and human rights in our continent. We also seek to underline the timeless legacy of Swiss Philippines and the historical bonds of a close friendship between our two countries and our two peoples, as well as our mutual commitment to uphold the pillars of our societies. Again, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. I congratulate Mr. Alain Berset and thank you all very much for supporting this prize and the values it represents and reflects to our societies. Thank you.
Awarding of the Lord Byron Prize to the Secretary General of the Council of Europe, Mr. Alain Berset. End of the ceremony. Thank you very much for your presence.